There is an invisible structure that determines how far your mind can evolve. Most people spend their entire lives using only the lowest levels of thought. They repeat, they memorize, they imitate, but they don't truly think. They believe that learning means collecting information, but learning, in its purest form, is the transformation of how you think. What you're about to understand isn't a memory trick or a study hack. It's a map of the human mind, the 7 levels of thought that can turn an ordinary student into a true master of reasoning. These levels aren't just steps of knowledge. They are stages of consciousness. Each one represents a different way of interacting with reality, from the simplest, where the brain merely copies what it sees, to the highest, where the mind observes itself and masters its own process of thinking. And when you master these levels, something extraordinary happens. You stop being a slave to information and become the author of understanding. The journey begins at the most basic point, the level of remembrance. And that's exactly where most people get lost, believing that memorizing is the same as learning. Pay close attention now, because this is where almost every student in the world goes astray. The first level of the mind is remembrance, and it's deceptive. It's the level where you confuse effort with progress. The more you repeat, the more you think you've mastered something. But the truth is, the brain here only repeats without understanding. It's like a machine copying words it doesn't comprehend. It records sounds, shapes, and letters, but it doesn't create connections. At this stage, knowledge is shallow, like words written in sand. A gentle breeze, time, stress, or distraction erases everything. That's why people spend hours studying and days later remember nothing, because remembering is not understanding. At this level, the mind works mechanically. It uses flashcards, rereading, repetition, endless summaries. It gets tired, but it doesn't grow. And the more it repeats, the more it believes it's improving. But in reality, it's just reinforcing the same cycle of superficiality. This is where the illusion of learning begins, the comfort of memorization. Because memorizing feels like progress, even when there is none. It's like running on a treadmill. The body moves, but it goes nowhere. True learning begins when you decide to question the very act of remembering. When instead of repeating, you start asking yourself, why is this like that? Where does this idea come from? How do I know that I know? That moment changes everything. It marks the shift from empty memory to living comprehension, from echo to reasoning. So from now on, to complete this level, do this. Explain as you memorize. Don't read passively. Say out loud what you just learned, even if it's still simple. This forces your brain to leave echo mode and enter understanding mode. Use visual association. Every memory needs an anchor. Turn words into images. Connect concepts to places, faces, or sensations. The brain remembers better than it understands, but it understands better than it repeats. Rewrite creatively. Take your notes and rephrase them without looking at the original. This makes your mind reconstruct, not copy. Test your memory under pressure. Close the book, stare at the ceiling, and say out loud what you recall. If you can't, don't blame yourself. That's your brain showing the path toward comprehension. And above all, avoid the comfort of repetition. Repetition feels good because it feels like progress. Question that. Remember, the easier it feels, the less real the progress is. From this point on, as your mind grows tired of repeating, curiosity begins to awaken. And that's what opens the door to the second level, understanding.
Now imagine the noise beginning to turn into sound.
The words you once repeated without meaning finally start to make sense. This is the second level of the mind, understanding. Here you stop being a repeater of information and start becoming an interpreter of knowledge. At the first level, the brain only copies. At the second, it connects. And that simple shift changes everything. It's when something inside you says, now I get it. It's the moment when knowledge stops feeling foreign and begins to feel like a part of who you are. But understanding doesn't happen by accident. It demands that you engage with the idea. You must talk to the content, question it, disagree with it, test it. The mind that truly understands is curious, not obedient. It doesn't accept truths without first breaking them apart and putting them back together. Remember, understanding isn't memorizing more clearly. It's uncovering the meaning hidden behind the word. That's why so many people believe they understand when they've merely rearranged what they memorized. True understanding is when you can explain something to someone else without looking at your notes, and it still sounds natural, fluid, and logical. Understanding is the first step toward freeing the mind. It's when knowledge stops being a weight and starts becoming power. Start translating what you study into your own words. Close the book and say out loud what you understood. Don't use the author's language, use yours. That forces the brain to form original connections. Ask intelligent questions. Ask, why does this happen? What if it were the opposite? How does this connect with what I already know? Questioning is the fuel of comprehension. Teach yourself. Explain the content as if you were teaching a child or a friend. If you get stuck, that's where your understanding still has a gap. Build simple mind maps, not to memorize, but to see relationships. The brain understands better when it sees the structure of ideas.
Avoid rushing.
Understanding requires pause, reflection, and even discomfort. When a subject feels too difficult, that's often the sign that you're close to real comprehension. When you begin to understand, something changes silently. Studying stops feeling like a burden and becomes a dialogue. And that inner dialogue prepares your mind for the next leap, the moment when knowledge becomes action. Now imagine the moment when knowledge stops being an idea on paper and becomes something you can do. This is the third level of the mind, the level of application. Here you discover whether you've truly learned or merely believed you had, because the real test of understanding isn't in repeating what you know, it's in using what you know. This is where theory collides with reality. The mind that applies is the mind that acts. It's not content with grasping ideas. It wants to see what happens when they're tested in the real world. At the second level, you understand, but at the third, you experiment. You step out of passivity and into the territory of error, practice, and iteration. And it's exactly there that learning becomes solid. Think about it. The human brain learns more by doing than by watching. Experience builds neural connections that no book can create. You can read 100 times about swimming, but you'll never truly know the water until you get in it. The same is true of any skill. You can study 1,000 theories, but you only master something when you apply it. And here lies the great secret of those who truly evolve. They don't wait to be ready to start. They learn while doing. They fail fast, correct fast, and learn even faster. Because every act of application is a mirror. It shows you what you truly master and what still needs work. Here's a practical way to strengthen level 3. Turn theory into action. After studying a concept, do something with it. If you learned a formula, apply it to a real problem. If you read about communication, test it in a conversation. If you studied focus, practice 1 uninterrupted hour of deep work. Solve simple problems daily. Apply 1 concept at a time, 1 problem, 1 idea. This practice creates clarity and eliminates the mental chaos of trying to use everything at once. Create mini projects. Learn something new? Build something small to prove you understood it. It can be a short text, a piece of code, a simple experiment, or a quick video explanation. The point is to externalize what you learned. Analyze your mistakes immediately. Mistakes are the best teachers. When something doesn't work, don't run, investigate. Ask, why did this fail? What could I have done differently? Keep the action-reflection cycle. Apply, observe, adjust, repeat. That is the rhythm of real learning. Progress doesn't move in a straight line, but in a spiral. With every turn, you rise a little higher. As the mind starts to apply, it awakens a new kind of power, the power to solve. But there's something deeper, because application is only the beginning of intelligence. The next level is learning to see what others don't. Patterns, relationships, the invisible connections between ideas. Now imagine the moment when the world begins to connect. Nothing feels isolated anymore, and each idea starts revealing hidden links to others. This is the 4th level of the mind, analysis, where thinking stops being linear and becomes systemic. Here you no longer see pieces of information, you see relationships. While most people still try to memorize facts, the analytical mind sees how the pieces fit. It wants to understand causes and consequences, similarities and differences. It observes, compares, and quietly begins to decipher the logic of reality. This is the level where strategic thinking is born, the gaze that separates what is essential from what is noise. Because when you understand how something connects to something else, you begin to understand the whole system. And that changes everything. Information stops being a fragment and becomes structure. Analysis is the turning point between the average student and the true thinker. Those who analyze don't accept ideas as they arrive. They take concepts apart, examine each piece, and only then decide how to rebuild them. That attitude turns learning into something living, dynamic, and personal. But be warned, analysis is demanding. It requires deeper and therefore slower thinking. And that's exactly why few remain at this level. Many confuse mental effort with error, when in truth, that discomfort is the sign that the brain is expanding. The more you compare, the more you understand. The more you take things apart, the more clarity you create. And over time, you begin to see patterns that were once invisible. That is the moment when thinking stops merely following knowledge and begins producing it. Start by comparing opposite ideas. Take two concepts and ask, in what ways are they similar? In what ways do they contradict each other? This simple exercise forces the brain to move beyond repetition and enter deep analysis. Build contrast tables. List differences, causes, and consequences between themes. It's not just about remembering. It's about seeing patterns. Create relational mind maps. Don't just connect words. Connect logical relationships. Cause, effect, hierarchy, dependency. See knowledge as a living organism. Ask second-level questions. Don't just ask, what is this? But rather, how is this related to that? Or, what changes if one element is altered? Comparative thinking is the training ground of the analytical mind. Accept slowness. Deep thinking is slower, but infinitely more powerful. Effort is the price of clarity and the proof that your brain is evolving. When the mind learns to analyze, it starts to think like a strategist. But something essential is still missing, the ability to judge what truly matters. Because seeing patterns is one thing, deciding which ones are relevant is another. And that's where the next level of thought is born, judgment. Pay attention now, because this is the point where thought stops being merely intelligent and becomes wise. The fifth level is the level of evaluation, of prioritization, of lucid judgment. Here you don't just understand the world, you decide what truly matters within it. So far, you've learned to remember, understand, apply, and analyze. But none of these abilities have real power unless you can choose. Knowing what to ignore is as important as knowing what to understand. A mind that cannot prioritize drowns in information. A mind that judges with clarity builds wisdom. This is the level where knowledge becomes criteria. You begin to see that not all ideas deserve the same weight. Not every argument is solid. Not every theory is applicable. Not every answer is true. The evaluating mind questions everything, even itself. At this stage, thinking becomes conscious and responsible. You stop following models and start creating your own parameters. You stop looking for answers and begin crafting better questions. But there's a challenge. Judging is not the same as criticizing. Judgment requires balance, the courage to doubt without cynicism, and the humility to learn without submission. The mature mind doesn't seek to be right, it seeks to be clear, and clarity is the highest form of intellectual power. Evaluating is the art of giving weight to ideas. It's the moment when thought becomes a compass, and you, finally, stop being a student and become a decision maker. So to strengthen level 5, do this. Ask, why does this matter all the time? When studying or reflecting, don't accept anything without purpose. If an idea doesn't change how you see, act, or think, maybe it doesn't deserve your time. Create value hierarchies. List what is essential, what is useful, and what is dispensable. This trains your mind to filter and prioritize. Debate with respect, but without submission. Listen to opposing opinions, but evaluate arguments, not voices. Thinking for yourself is the first act of intellectual freedom. Write critical syntheses. After reading something, note what you agree with, what you disagree with, and what you still don't understand. This simple habit turns reading into active thought. And finally, suspend quick judgment. Rushing to conclude is the enemy of clarity. Wait, observe, question. Discernment is born in the silence between stimulus and response. When you learn to judge with lucidity, you begin to see the world as a board of possibilities. But the evaluating mind doesn't create, it refines. And that's why the next level is the most creative of all, the level of synthesis, innovation, and creation, the mind that builds new ideas from what already exists. Now imagine the moment when thought stops following known paths and begins to carve new trails. This is the sixth level of the mind, creation, where knowledge turns into invention. Here the mind ceases to be just a tool for memory and becomes a source of originality. At the fifth level, you learn to judge what's worth your time. But at the sixth, you go further. You use everything you know to generate something that doesn't yet exist. It's the stage where thought becomes art. The creative mind combines old ideas into new forms, sees solutions where others see limits, and turns chaos into meaning. Creation isn't a gift. It's the natural result of a mind that has learned to think deeply. Those who understand, apply, analyze, and judge with clarity will, inevitably, create. Because creation is the reflection of a mind that has mastered the fundamentals and dares to go beyond them. But here's the secret. Creation doesn't come from overexertion. It comes from mental freedom. The best ideas appear when the brain is relaxed, curious, and playing with possibilities. Creativity is thought in its purest form of curiosity, the same state you had as a child. The creative mind doesn't fear mistakes. It understands that every mistake is just an attempt with another name. It doesn't seek perfection. It seeks discovery. That's why creation is one of the most human acts there is. It's the mind in dialogue with the unknown. So from today on, play with what you've learned. Take something you've mastered and change the rules. If you've learned a theory, test its opposite. If you've mastered a technique, invent a new way to apply it. To create is to play with knowledge. Ask questions that have no ready answers. The creative mind moves through curiosity, not certainty. Ask, what if? Why not? How could this work differently? Impossible questions open invisible doors. Mix different worlds. Great ideas are born when two fields collide. Take a concept from science and apply it to art. Take something from philosophy and link it to technology. Genius lives in the intersections. Write down everything that comes to mind. Ideas are fragile. Write down even the ones that seem absurd. Sometimes that's where innovation begins. Create to understand. Don't wait to master everything before you start producing. When you create, you understand your studies more deeply. The mind learns best in the act of expression. When the mind creates, it touches the edge of what it means to be human, the point where knowledge turns into meaning. But there's still one level higher, awareness of your own thinking. The moment when the mind not only thinks, but observes itself thinking. And that's where the seventh and final level begins. Now imagine your mind standing in front of a mirror. Not an ordinary mirror, but one that reflects thought itself. You're not just thinking, you're watching how you think. This is the seventh and final level of the mind, reflection. At this level, learning stops being something that happens to you and becomes something you control consciously. It's the stage of cognitive self-awareness, when you understand your own mental process. You're no longer the student trapped in the maze, you're the architect observing it from above. At the sixth level, you create, but at the seventh, you refine the creator within. You begin to recognize the patterns behind your successes, the triggers behind your mistakes, the useless repetitions, and the moments when your thinking becomes lazy. Here, the mind becomes the tool, and you become the operator. Reflection is the point where wisdom surpasses knowledge, because knowing something means being able to explain it. But understanding how you learn, think, and decide, that gives you the power to transform everything. The reflective mind observes its own behavior. It asks itself, why did I understand this easily, but not that? What did I do differently when I truly learn something? What distracts me? What deepens me? These questions don't just correct mistakes, they help you design a new way of thinking. Those who master this level master their own growth, because power no longer lies in the content, but in the process. You no longer depend on external techniques, you become your own method. And here's the most beautiful part. The more you reflect, the more you realize that thought has no end. The mind that observes itself grows in spirals. Each turn brings new understanding. Each mistake reveals another layer of itself. So explain what you've learned out loud, not for others, but for yourself. If you can't explain it clearly, it's because you don't yet understand it. External clarity is born from inner clarity. Analyze your own learning process. After you've learned something, write down, how did I learn this? What worked? What held me back? This simple habit turns studying into continuous self-development. Accept mistakes as diagnosis, not defeat. When you fail, don't blame yourself. Observe it like a scientist studying a phenomenon. Every mistake contains a map of what you haven't yet understood. Create rituals of metaconsciousness. Take 10 minutes a day to think about your own thinking. Ask yourself, what is my mind doing right now? Is it creating or repeating? That small pause reorganizes the brain to operate at higher levels of awareness. Keep a curious gaze. A wise mind isn't the one that knows the most. It's the one that never stops asking questions. Curiosity is the fuel of reflection, the mirror that keeps the ego from becoming blindness. When you reach the 7th level, you realize that a genius isn't born ready. He is built, layer by layer, consciousness by consciousness. And at the end of this journey, you understand that mastering the mind isn't about memorizing the world, but about understanding your own process of understanding. Those who reach this level know that thinking is an art, and learning is the most beautiful act of becoming human. Now, for all of this to truly sink into your subconscious, write in the comments, I choose to think at higher levels. Doing that will anchor the idea in your mind and inspire others to do the same. And if you want to keep evolving with me, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell, because in the next videos, we'll go even deeper on this journey toward the total mastery of the mind. You're not here by accident. You're here because you truly want to think, and that is the first sign of a genius mind.